Hello, and welcome to History by the Pint, the podcast series that discusses all things history and archaeology in the time it takes to drink a pint. My name is Alex Rowson, I'm a producer and writer, and with me as always is Glyn Davis, a curator at Colchester Castle Museum, and Chris Shavitsky, a lecturer and researcher in Rome. This time round, we're going to be exploring the shadowy depths of the Maya underworld.
Alex, you've been away on holiday, or is it a research trip, or I guess the nice thing of your interests is you get to combine both of them. Where have you been?
Yeah, it was more of a holiday than a research trip, but a very enjoyable one. I went to Belize in Central America, which is just below Mexico, borders Guatemala, and Honduras to the south. And it's a pretty special place, actually. Imagine it's got the beautiful barrier reef up the coastline. It's got the jungles and these fantastic Maya sites. So I thought I'd do a little bit of a chat about one particularly fascinating Maya site that I visited. And it's a ritual cave site. And it's got this fantastic name. It's called Actun Tunichal Muknal.
That's how you pronounce it?
Okay. To you and me, it translates as the cave of the Stone Sepulchre, which is very, it's very Indiana Jones title. But like I said, it was just one of the most amazing archaeological sites that I've ever visited, I think. And I've always been quite interested in Maya civilization, and not just the romanticism of it, these fantastic pyramids and temples set in the jungles, but also a lot more about the indigenous beliefs and the peoples. And the Maya still exist today. You know, they're a population of sort of 6 million or so. They never vanished. So although they're associated with these collapsing civilizations, they persist pretty much from 2000 BC right up to the present day. But there's been various good times and bad times within that. And the Maya civilization, which stretches from sort of Mexico down to Honduras, it was never a single empire. There were different city-states within it, or kingdoms, I should say. But to come back to this site, so yeah, the Cave of the Stone Sepulchre is now open to the public. And it was only mapped, I think, in the late 1980s by a guy called Thomas Miller. And then archaeologists went in after that in the early 90s and did about 8 years field work. So they know quite a lot about it. They've mapped all the different chambers and the artifacts that they found within them. But it's organised that every day 125 people can go into this cave, and you go in little groups of 8 people each. And like I say, it's a bit of an Indiana Jones experience, because to get to it, you have to trek across a patch of jungle for about 45 minutes, and that entails crossing a number of rivers. And you're going to where the river exits this cave, this sort of keyhole shape opening that you suddenly come to, this beautiful sort of green-blue pool of water. So you go into the water and you emerge into this first chamber, and then you have to follow this river, and you come across a number of chambers within it. So I thought I might just take you guys on a little journey through some of these chambers.
Just before we go into that,
yeah.
Do we know anything? This cave is quite remote now. Was it just as remote at the period that there's activity taking place in it? What's going on around it? Is it something that is remote and difficult to get to in the jungle, centuries ago, or do we know anything about that?
That's always a thing with these Maya sites, because today a lot of them are covered in jungle, but back in the day they would have all been cleared, and there would have been fields and settlements and things. And unfortunately, the archaeologists who did the project had done a lot of surveying up and down this river, this river valley called the Roaring Creek Valley. They figured out that it was pretty densely populated, sort of in the first millennium AD, pretty much from 300 AD up to 1000 AD, sort of classic Maya period, as it were. So they not only know that there's a number of settlements in the area, but also a number of other caves as well that are being used. The area was probably under control of either Tikal or Karakol, which are these two other huge Maya settlements that have their boom period in the classic Maya period, sort of around about 500 AD. So there is stuff going on. So it's remote for us today, but for the Maya, it wasn't necessarily that case. So to take you back to the cave, then we've swum across this river into the opening. We've gone into the main chamber, and now we're sort of spelunking, as it were, along the river course through this really sort of narrow channel. But then you get to this chamber called the Chamber of the Stele by the archaeologists. And in one corner, there is an opening up to the forest above, which looks like it was probably one of the original entrances for the Maya using this site. They probably would have had, a ladder coming down, and they would enter the cave system with torches and offerings and things like that. And there's another sort of small cavern, which we didn't get to see. It was sort of placed quite high up on the rock face, where other offerings had been found. But the guides that we were going with were very knowledgeable and being very well trained, and they knew all the literature as well. So our guide, Hector was his name, pointed to this ledge on the other side of the chamber where there were these two very interesting stone stelae or sort of stone monuments about the size of a gravestone. One had been very clearly sort of notched to almost look like a sort of chainsaw, and then next to it was another, both of slate but slightly different hues of slate, and it had a sort of sharpened point. And the guide pointed out that what's really interesting, that by the base of these two stone stelae, a couple of obsidian blades had been found, and also quite a nice vase with a scene of a Maya warrior presenting a war captive to be sacrificed. And that's quite apt, actually, because it's believed that the obsidian blades were used for these bloodletting rituals. Therefore, the archaeologists think that one of the stone stelae represents a piece of obsidian, and the other one represents a stingray tail. And these are the two implements that the Maya used to bloodlet, essentially. This is sort of self...
Oh, doing it to yourself?
Yeah.
Okay, so this isn't sacrifice.
Not yet. We'll get to that somewhere later. But so you imagine you've come to this cave for whatever reasons, and you've got your implements, and you descend into the cave, and this first chamber you come to is associated with offerings of your blood, basically. And the Maya had sort of fairly gruesome ways of doing it. They would either, cut their lip, like again with an obsidian blade, or the edge of a stingray tail. Yeah. Or a lot of them had sort of pierced tongues, and they would put a rope, a barbed rope or string through their tongue and go up and down and to draw the blood from the tongue. And if they were interested in fertility, then they would get their genitals out and start cutting them to draw the blood.
That seems to the opposite of helping with fertility, but I'm not a doctor.
Yeah. So what they would do, they would sort of either scatter it around, or they would drip it onto a piece of bark or a leaf or something, and then burn that. So it went up in a puff of smoke, and that was like a way to open up communication with either the gods or the ancestors that dwelled in these underground spaces. They thought this was, the land of the lords of the underworld, but not just the lords of the underworld. Certain key fertility and important gods lived there as well. The earth god lived there. The maize god sort of sprouted up from the underworld, and the rain god were there as well. So it wasn't just the underworld, a dark, dismal place. There were these other gods associated with, the fertility of life and the cyclical nature of the agricultural year that they had to go and be in communion with and offer to as a sort of reciprocal act.
I was going to ask Alex, did the Maya have sort of a pantheon of gods then? Or, you're speaking out certain gods here, I suppose, with traits and ancestors, and I wondered if there was a sort of a holistic pantheon and how we sort of know about that.
Yeah, there is a pantheon of gods. You have all the gods you'd imagine, not too different from cultures in the West. You have the rain god and the sun god and the wind god and the jester god and the underworld lords, all, with horrible names like One Death and the Pus Demon and all these kind of, stone staff and all these kind of fantastic names. We know about that not only because Maya people survived to the present day and oral histories are passed down, but also we have a lot of artistic evidence, painting on vases and things like that were heavily imbued with religious symbolism, and obviously the Maya system of writing has been deciphered as well. So we have a lot of evidence to sort of bring together to get this view of their cosmology, really. But the underworld was an interesting place because it was called Shipalba, which means the place of fear. But like I said, it was also associated with these rites of fertility. It was associated with water specifically. When people died, they were going to the watery place. And obviously water was incredibly, incredibly important to the ancient Maya because it was the basis for their entire agricultural system. And their dependence on sometimes a climate that was not always predictable plays into the story of their civilization because they're really tied to getting the rains on time and things like that. So anyway, going back to this chamber, it seems to begin the use around about 300 to 350 AD and goes up to around about 950 AD. But it seems like the earliest activity in the cave complex is situated around the entrance and the most accessible chambers, which is quite interesting because as we move forward in time, the archaeologists have tracked a change in the location of activity, and activity begins to venture further down into the cave complex.
Is this based on ceramics, on pottery, that they're able to try and date it?
Yeah, so they've ceramics and radiocarbon dating and a few other things as well. So yeah, that's the cave of the Selly. So we'll get back into the water. We'll climb. I think it's about 500 meters down through this. Obviously pitch black. You have a little head torch and your hard hat on and stuff, but you're sort of spelunking along the river course, trying not to think about the catfish that are nibbling at your feet, which is a bit distinct.
The guides and everyone who organises this, do they give you your clothing and footwear, or do you come prepared? There wasn't anyone in flip-flops or something?
No, yeah, you're supposed to wear shoes, a swimming costume, and something you can get wet. But
swimming costume. I don't remember Indiana Jones in a swimming costume.
Yeah,
fortunately,
and a lot of people were wearing life jackets as well and hard helmets. So yeah, it wasn't the
wearing a life jacket. How deep was it?
Yeah, it wasn't very deep, but I guess
you've just got these people in inflatables.
Yeah, but I guess the problem is that some of the bits you have to go down, and your head literally only just squeezes through some of these spaces, and you think
that sounds horrible.
Yeah, if the water level was a little bit higher, you would have to be going underwater. So we set off a little bit, and then we stop at another point. I think about 500 meters in, there's a big wall on one side which has a sort of passageway at the top, and you sort of climb up this rock, and you're asked to take your shoes off, and everyone's sort of wearing socks. And the idea is that you're now entering a site that is pristine. Is not that different to when the Maya themselves would have visited. So you take off your shoes and you plod through into the beginning of this absolutely huge main chamber that at one end there's this cavernous sort of area called the cathedral where you have these fantastic stalagmites and stalactite formations and things. But as you're following the guide, a couple of things become evident. And the first one is that you're essentially walking up the bed of a dried up river. There's lots of signs of the pools in the sort of travertine. I think it's travertine limestone. And actually this place, although the stream at the bottom's perennial year round, this extra watercourse only really occurs when there's heavy rainfall. And then you start to notice a number of ceramics, quite large cauldrons. They're ritually killed or broken. And I know that's something, you probably have that in your collection at Colchester, don't you, Glenn? Sort of ritually destroyed prehistoric objects.
Yeah, I think that's quite a common thing throughout a lot of time periods in archaeology, isn't it? Yeah, this, but it can mean different things, I suppose. Releasing, if you believe, objects to hold the spirit of someone or something, to release that, or the purposeful damaging of things so they can't be retained. So yeah, I think it's quite an interesting practice.
Yeah, and they definitely got it there. I mean, pretty much 99% of these things have either got a little tiny bit broken off or a kill hole, essentially. And yeah, the archaeologists theorise the exact same thing, that these are not necessarily inanimate objects. They are imbued with some sort of spiritual importance or a spiritual life. And therefore, to sacrifice them, to offer them to the gods, you sort of have to kill them. Some of the other finds they found in there, they found a sort of piece of a dog whistle, like an ocarina. They found various other obsidian blades for bloodletting. They found some evidence of faunal remains. There's a couple of pieces of jaguar bone. And what other offerings do they have? Yeah, just things that you would imagine them to be offering. Food. There's evidence of a lot of burning. They're probably burning copal, which is like an incense like frankincense. And there are human remains as well. And a number of the human remains seem to have been slightly moved by the periodic flooding. But what I should say is that a lot of them are still in situ, or appear to be still in situ, And a lot of the artifacts are still in situ, primarily because they get this coating of like calcium carbonate in it because of the conditions of the cave. So they become like encrusted, or parts become encrusted in crystal. So you're flashing your head torch around and these things are just sort of like sparkling in amongst the darkness.
You paint quite a picture, Alex. I'm just thinking of how much activity is down there, how many people are coming down there for what length of time, and what they're bringing with them. I don't know. I'm struggling to get a sense of how active, I suppose, these caves are.
Yeah, sorry, and just adding to that, how big is it?
The main chamber is something like 180 metres long, 35 metres at its widest point. So we're talking about a huge cavern, essentially.
Okay, well, that's large.
Yeah, it's really, really impressive. So you get that sense of underground magnificence again, of this being a sacred, holy place. It's a really fitting place as being a portal to the underworld, essentially, is what they thought it was. And interestingly, there seems to be an uptick in activity from around about the early 700s to about the mid 900s. So that seems to be the period where people are going into the main chamber and bringing the most offerings, I guess. There's 700 odd artifacts. I think we should think about special occasions, really. And this comes to the crux of, for me, the most fascinating thing about this site is, why are people going deeper into this cave? Why are they changing their activity? Why suddenly, in this later period, are we getting an uptick in activity? And that has to be with the climate change at that point. This quite severe drought that takes place towards the end of the cave activity, around about 700 to 950. There are periods of very, very tough drought. The natural cycle is being broken up. And the idea from the archaeologists is that people are therefore, at the time of crisis, going further into the cave. And that's why the activity is leaving more signs. I think there's a very sudden cut-off at around about 950, 960. And that's quite closely associated with this huge collapse in Maya civilization, which happens around about 1000 AD, something like that. It seems to be all over the big sites in central Maya territory, the Tikals, the Caracols, the Copans. They seem to just go bust. The population plummets. And then there seems to be migration away from these places to either the highlands or up to the Yucatan, where they have underwater cenotes or reservoirs. So it does seem to be that this cave is really documenting this period of crisis within the local community, where whatever they're offering is not working. And what's interesting about where they've put these offerings, they seem to be collected in the hollowed pools of where the water once flowed, and they're placing it there, and they're almost trying to urge the rain or the water to come back, to flow down this dry watercourse and to answer their prayers. And it's just not working. And that's where the human remains come in. And of course, there's this big thing about human remains. Are they there for burial, or are they there potentially as sacrifices? And I think the archaeologist Jamie Alway, who sort of led the dig, puts a pretty convincing case towards them being sacrifices. Some of them have blunt trauma. And it's interesting that there's quite a high proportion of young children, so sort of out of the 18 individuals, I think 11 are children. There's this sort of belief that the tears of children were particularly highly charged, were particularly powerful at getting the rain god to relent and to change the weather. So there's this horrible scenario where these children might have been taken in and either killed in some form, or actually, bound up and left to die in these dark spaces. Presumably, the more they cried, the more beneficial it was to the ritual.
That's a gruesome picture.
Yeah.
I think the most haunting thing about it is the furthest recess of the main chamber. There's this skeleton, this incredible skeleton of a young female or male. They're not too sure. They haven't been able to pick up the bones, obviously, because they're cased in this calcite. And that she's sort of spread-eagled, or he or she's spread-eagled. And it's just perfectly preserved. And you suddenly just come across it. And it does feel a bit like this is not only incredibly poignant and tragic and all the rest of it, but it does feel at the same time like you're entering someone's very, very sacred space, and you're seeing something that's very, very highly charged. So yeah, incredibly powerful, incredibly poignant.
So, Alex, you said it feels like entering someone else's space. Now, I find this really interesting. Well, I'm interested in your experience from this being an archaeological site, and maybe your perceptions of what's the line between this being a tourist attraction, if you like, even if it's being managed, and where does that step over to issues with potentially damaging or interrupting this space and the archaeology which should be preserved for forevermore?
I think they've done it as best they can. They have small groups going in there. The tour guides are excellent. You have the head torches. There's no other artificial sources of light. That you're not bringing anything into the cave and leaving it there. I mean, they have sort of learnt from experience that allowing people in with cameras and stuff hasn't been good, because one guy dropped a camera on a skull, which obviously was absolutely tragic. But that has at least stopped them saying, look, you guys can't take anything electronic in here. So you literally go in just with your headlamp and what you're wearing, which is the right thing to do. And
there's also an advantage there because it stops people taking selfies and everything,
and it would ruin. And I'd be guilty of that as well. I'd want to be recording this on some form, but actually, I really like the fact that wasn't available, because you begin to get more into the experience. You begin to think about observations and your feelings about it, and you're not fussing around with a phone and stuff. So I really liked that experience. So yeah, I don't know if that's maybe probably nattered on for a bit too long there, but hopefully that's introduced you guys to this cave archaeology, and perhaps in a future podcast we might revisit Central America and Maya civilization, because it is a fascinating topic.
It sounds incredible. It just makes me want to go.
Yeah, absolutely, do go. It's amazing. But all right, guys. Well, thanks for listening to me, and I guess we'll catch up next time.
All right.
All the best.
Talk to you later.
Thanks.
All right. Bye now. Bye.